All right, my friends, you all saw the State of the Union, I assume, because we were here and we were drinking and Lauren Southern was drunk and she yelled and called Biden based because he said we got to secure the border.
That's true, we did.
So the reason I bring that up in the context of this story about Biden's new billionaires tax is that Joe Biden, during the State of the Union, says he's a capitalist, secure our borders, make America, build American. Now, after that's long past, he comes out with this far left 20% minimum tax on households worth more than $100 million. This is a Trojan horse, mark my words. Regular people are going to be like, why do I care? I don't make $100 million.
Yeah.
Two things. They will lower the threshold like they did with the income tax initially.
Always.
Was it, the initial income tax was like 3% only for the ultra wealthy, right?
Mm-hmm. And
then, of course, they just move it down. But this is also Joe Biden desperately pandering to the far left after calling himself a capitalist. He's like, I wonder if they're doing a media strategy of, okay, State of the Union was this big TV thing that old people watch. Say what the old people want to hear. Now, internet medium put out a statement that's what the left wants to hear, the progressives. So he's going to tax the rich. They say 20% minimum tax on unrealized gains. So Elon Musk, this is the craziest thing. It's basically like if you buy, check this out, used cars have gone up in value like crazy because of the chip shortage. Mm-hmm. Let's say this tax was a general tax on everybody, unrealized gains tax. You buy a used car for $2,000, but then the chip shortage hits. And now the value of used cars in all government metrics is up 100%. Your $2,000 car is now $4,000. The government goes, you got a $2,000 unrealized gain right there. And you say, well, I don't have any money. I just have my used car. And they say, then you got to sell the car.
Yep.
To pay the tax. You say, but if I sell the car, then I won't be able to work. And they're like, then you're going to be in trouble for not paying your taxes. So you sell the car. Guess what? You could only get a couple grand for the car. And they say, now you owe us taxes on the income you got from that $2,000. And you're like, so I got to pay the tax on the unrealized gain, but then I sold the car and now I got to pay taxes on the income. Right now it's $100 million. But rest assured, you give them the ability to tax unrealized gains, two things are going to happen. One, they'll lower the threshold. And the second is inflation will push you up further and further to that threshold.
Yeah, no, it's true. This is one of the most insane economic policies that he could try to implement right now. First of all, we're not in a place where you can really talk about introducing these like radical new measures to socialize the economy. First of all, we're not really in a healthy place. So to look at these sort of more social justice-y, far left pandering options for policy and try to implement them is ridiculous. But also what this effectively does, Tim, you're using the example of a used car. It would force people who are successfully running businesses to the point of making them profitable to sell off their shares. So basically somebody who is moving a company in the direction of making it more profitable is forced to give up control of their company so they can pay the tax on unrealized gains. And what an unrealized gain is, by the way, is money you literally have not made. It's completely theoretical. The government is taxing something you don't have.
Yep. Yeah.
And they could theoretically just be like, hey, Seamus, that shirt, $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. How do you assess the value of something like that? I mean,
Hunter Biden's art assessor is going to assess the value of all this stuff.
Exactly.
But,
well, that's a big trick too. People need to understand that you're going to all of a sudden see billionaires being like that Rembrandt painting. Unfortunately, nobody wants to buy it anymore because of the tax, so it's only worth $1,000. Yeah. I actually lost that money. Can you write off the unrealized losses?
Yeah. Well, I'll give this regime some credit for recognizing the moment that we're in. I think now more than ever, there's an appetite on both sides of the political aisle to kind of stick it to some of these billionaires. And on the right, they're sick of the woke billionaires who fund all these, these nonprofits, the Arabellums that help fortify elections against us. And so there's an appetite to take it to the billionaire class that are people, the Trump base. I mean, we're working class folks, and so the billionaires don't have the same luster, and we don't have the same party anymore. And so there is an appetite there, I think, to get some on the more populist right to jump on board with something on this nature. But Tim, you bring up a good point where they're not going to stop there. If we give the government an inch, they're going to take it down to the half a millionaires to the eventually anybody that makes under 100 grand will be impacted by it.
Or in 50 years when inflation is really, really bad, and let's say $1 is now a dime, so you're spending $10 on a candy bar, you're spending $100, on a couple movie tickets or whatever. They also, lowering the threshold and inflation is going to get you closer and closer to that limit.
Well, I think that the billionaires should wake the hell up, though, especially, the ones that help fund these woke institutions and the woke organizations to get, eat their ESG scores higher, because they're losing the people at for historically defended them. They're pissing off a lot of Republican voters who've always been against the increase of taxes. They've been against the punishing the wealthy. But when you're using your wealth to fund organizations that hate our country, it kind of pisses off some people, and they see stuff like that and they're like, well, right now it's only for the billionaires, so maybe I'll support that.
But you know what? I think a lot of the billionaires know that ultimately this tax is going to disproportionately affect wealthy people who aren't lucky enough to be in the exact bracket that billionaires are in, and therefore will have a more difficult time avoiding the increased taxes on their net worth. I'm sure they'll find all sorts of workarounds and loopholes so that they don't end up having to pay, and it will actually make business more difficult for their competition. This is probably good for that. It's probably good for them.
Take a look at like the progressive tax brackets. What's the highest bracket? Is it 250 and up, or is it like 500?
I need to double check. I think someone changed.
No, it's like
it's
like 250 and up. Yeah.
So imagine this.
It's like 37.5%.
Imagine you're a middle class, working class person, and you hit it big somehow, and now all of a sudden you're making $400,000 a year, which is a lot of money. You're paying a very high tax rate on that on everything above 250, which is substantial. It's, what is it, like 40, was it 38 to 40 something percent?
Yeah, like 38 and a half.
38. If you're making $10 million a year as like the CEO of a company, and you're paying that percentage, everything after 250 is effectively disposable income for you to invest any way you see fit. If you're making 250 to 400, you're like, this is my chance to grow and become a wealthy American, but they're pulling you down. So the simplest way to explain it is, if you only need, in the United States right now, $150K a year to be considered middle class median, and that's because of inflation. It used to be 77,000, then 80, and who knows where it's at now.
Yeah.
Once you hit that threshold, you're getting a savings, you're building a little bit of wealth, but you're not on track for independent wealth where you can just dump money into a bunch of funds and then make interest and things like that. You make $10 million, who cares? Look, I got my $250 a year to fund my lifestyle, and then I've got an extra, $9.75 million. Oh, I got to pay 38%. I still got $5 million where I can spend that on anything I want and generate massive amounts of wealth. As the richer you get, the less that impacts you. So long story short of it is, these taxes stop people from becoming wealthy. Now you tell that to the left, you explain it, and they say, good. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It means the billionaires will stay billionaires forever, and they'll become oligarchs, and then no one can rise up and displace them and challenge their power.
Yeah, exactly. And so another thing that he's failing to take into account here, and of course he is because he's on the left, is a concept known as the Laffer curve. So I've talked about this on your show before. And there are some less educated lefties who will say the Laffer curve doesn't exist. It does. Every left-wing economist agrees it exists. The only debate is whether the parabola peaks at a higher tax rate or a lower tax rate.
Can you explain the curve?
Yeah, sure. So if you tax at 0%, your revenue will be zero. And if you tax at 100%, your revenue will also be zero because no one's going to work for money that they can't keep. So that means that somewhere between 0% and 100% is the revenue maximizing tax rate, at which point you can reach it. And then if you tax any further, you're actually going to generate less revenue. And so interestingly, federal revenues for the United States as a whole have basically stayed around 20% regardless of what the tax rate has been, which suggests that's probably the largest share of GDP that they're able to pull. And when I said 22%, I'm speaking as a share of GDP. So that's probably the largest share of GDP they'll be able to pull out of the economy. So all they're going to be doing with something like this, if it even is effective at getting these people to sell off their wealth, because again, who knows, many of them are going to be able to circumvent it. But let's say it has its, quote unquote, intended effect in that way. It's probably not going to increase revenue. I would argue that it wouldn't increase revenue because the Trump tax cuts actually led to an increase in revenue. The left continually claims that it didn't, and Biden talks about this, quote unquote, fiscal mess that Trump left him, but that's complete nonsense. Federal revenues increased, but our spending growth outpaced the increase in federal revenues, so we ended up with more of a deficit after the Trump tax cuts than we had prior, but that was because of an increase in spending, not a deficit in the amount that we were bringing in.
Why don't we just print more money, bro?
Yeah. Well, no, let's just do that. That's worked fantastically for us.
They're just slapping Band-Aids on Band-Aids.
Why don't we start another $1 trillion war, like multi-trillion-dollar war? Let's go get a ground war with Russia, like Adam Kinzinger and Lindsey Graham want, and you can get some more money. But
That seems like the direction things are going.
Yeah,
I think a majority, a majority of Americans fear that the U.S. will get involved in a ground war with Russia.
It's terrifying, especially I couldn't think about the parents who have children who are active duty, and they all watch what the hell happened in Afghanistan, and thinking about the degenerates and the morons who are in charge right now are going to be in charge of the military, the operation on the ground there. There's not a whole lot of confidence in their ability to get the job done. And so praying that we can de-escalate and get peace. But, it's just a mess.
Let's talk about peace here at home.
Well, can I mention one more thing?
Oh, yeah, do it.
So you discussed, you brought up Biden bingo, which we played during the State of the Union address. And I want to mention that headline starts with Biden whispers that it's not right, which was on the bingo card we had.
That's awesome.
For Biden's State of the Union bingo. He likes to whisper. It's
Daily
really
Mail has
thing.
some great headlines.
It's not right.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.